Hi, everybody. I find myself thinking these days that it's hard to believe that the world has changed so much in such a short time. It seems unreal, but it's happened. And it's true. Life is fragile, handled with prayer. And one of the things that I've noticed in commercials like car companies, insurance companies, even fast food companies, is the word uncertain is used a lot. These are uncertain times, or we're living in uncertain times. Well, as Christians, that is very true, but I think as believers, we need to hold on to those things that we know are certain. And let me just share a couple of those with you. First of all, the first thing that I think of when I think about that which is certain is that God is sovereign. He is on the throne. And his reasons for allowing this fallen world to experience pandemic, natural disasters, catastrophic events, he has his reasons because he's God and he is sovereign. And he can bring beauty from the ashes. He works all things together for our good. And he's going to redeem this fallen world one day. And that's something that we can be certain about. Second thing that I think we should be certain about is that the church is still the church. And this crisis reminds us of a very important principle. And that is, as a church, it's not only about what we do, it's about who we are. I mean, we can't do a lot of the things that we normally do, but we're still the church. So I'm very grateful for our team that has worked so hard to develop our online presence. And of course, we're looking forward to meeting together again. And in the meantime, I just want to thank you for your prayers and your support, your faithfulness to give and to pray and to connect with us online. And hopefully we're going to be back together real soon. So the church is still the church. And that's a beautiful thing. God is on the throne. The church is still the church. And then the third thing that I think, when I think about that which is certain, is that this pandemic will end. Last Sunday, I mentioned a date for potentially gathering together again. I think I said May 17th. Well, I want to address that issue with you today. When will our church begin meeting again? I want you to understand, first of all, that our leadership team has taken this matter very seriously, and we're going to do our very best. We're going to do due diligence in order to make decisions that will be, I think, respectful and safe. I think those are two key terms. If it were up to me, we would meet this Sunday. But I'm not the last word, and our elders and our leadership team are thinking and we're praying and we're discussing these issues so as to make the best possible decision and to be of one heart and one mind in the matter. But, there are a few things that I want to say to you that I think are important that we need to remember. And the first one is this. We are not looking to the government for permission to meet. That's not what we're doing. Every pastor I know and every church that I'm familiar with has suspended services for the time being. And I totally agree with that. I understand that. I think it was the right thing to do given our circumstances. But we did not do that because we were forced to do that by the government. But we did so before God and out of love and concern for our community. I do not believe that the government has the authority to tell the church when it can and cannot meet. Why? Well, because meeting together is something that God has already commanded us to do. And we should only not do it when we believe that the Lord would have us stop doing it for the blessing and benefit of our community. So let me explain a little bit what I mean about this, because I would not want anybody to think that I'm not aware of Romans 13 being in the New Testament. Okay, Romans 13 verses 1 and 2 say this: let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. Hey, that is absolutely true, and we believe that. We believe that as Christians, we are subject to the government's God-given authority. However, the government's authority is not an absolute authority. And by that, I mean that there is a limit to what the government can tell us to do as a church. And that limit is established by God Himself. As Christians, we are bound to obey the government as long as doing so doesn't conflict or contradict with what God has told us to do in His Word. As you know, as the Apostle Peter said in Acts chapter 4 and verse 19, we ought to obey God rather than man. So this is true. That principle of God being our first and absolute authority, that principle is true in every structure of authority, whether it be the church, whether it be the home, whether it be our businesses, our vocation. We are to be subject to our bosses. We are to be subject to the government. Husbands are to be subject to Christ, and wives are to be subject to their husbands. So God has created these structures of authority, and one of those is that as citizens, we are to be submissive to the government. But it's not an absolute submission. In other words, if the government tells us to do something that God forbids, we disobey the government. Now, there are churches around the world that meet on a regular basis contrary to government authorities, to the laws that have been instituted. And why? Why do they meet? Well, because as Christians, our first responsibility is to obey God. Only His authority is absolute. So that, I think we're clear on that. I think every Christian would understand that. But the second thing I want to say is, therefore, if that's true, then how do we respond to the governing authorities at this present time? Now, will there come a time when we decide to meet contrary to government recommendations? Perhaps. I don't know. At this point, I can't give you an answer to that. And one of the things I think we need to understand is that not all pastors and not all churches are going to agree about this. So how we respond when we get ready to make decisions is something that we really need to pray about. And we're not waiting for the government. So it's like A.W. Tozer once said, a scared world needs a fearless church. And I totally agree with that. But it doesn't need, the world doesn't need a stupid church. And so we want to know how to respond to our government authorities. And so first of all, I would say that our response should be respectful and in love. We don't do anything out of spite, and we don't do anything to draw attention to ourselves. As Christians, we should be the very best citizens. We should render to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's, and we should do so with grace and humility. So our response should be loving and respectful before God. And secondly, our response should be incremental, which brings me to my last point. What's our plan? Well, as for when we're going to start meeting again, I can't give you a definite answer at this time, but I just wanted you to know that our leadership team has already begun meeting and discussing this, and we are developing a plan that we believe Well, first of all, a plan that will honor the Lord. And secondly, a plan that will be safe and considerate given the situation. And at the present time, we believe we should continue streaming our services and classes, even do this after we start meeting again. Why? Well, because there's going to be some people who are more cautious than others. And that's just the way it is. And it's important that we understand this and not allow ourselves to become critical or judgmental of each other when we don't agree on the matter. You know, we also hope to establish some events that will be conducive to smaller gatherings. I would also, during this time, think it would be great to have small groups start meeting again and even starting new groups. This might be a great time. Did you know that the church always prospers during hard times? And if it's the Lord's will and he lays it on your heart to call some folks and get together, if for nothing else, then to pray, I would encourage you to do that. Maybe you can start your own Zoom group. But this is a time where I would encourage you to consider about meeting together again as small groups. And then finally, we're going to consider all of the recommendations that are given to us by legitimate health authorities, and we'll implement whatever protocols we have to serve our community and our people in terms of safety measures. Now, we might make some mistakes along the way, but our rule of thumb is this: if we make mistakes, we hope to err on the side of caution. You know, the next couple of months, folks, are going to generate controversy and some debate, and that's okay. I think we need to have these discussions. I think it's inevitable. But let's make sure that we examine our hearts and before the Lord, so that whatever we do or whatever we say it and we do it in the Spirit of Christ with love and respect and humility. We're going to keep you updated as best we can. So be checking the website and the weekly e-letter, and keep us in prayer as we move forward with this. So thanks for taking time to listen. I hope you're having a blessed day, and I hope you're staying safe. We hope to see you real soon.